Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to today's show. I'm so excited to dive into that. Before we do, I have been really feeling the importance for sensitive women to unfurl, unravel themselves and learn to be tender and soft. And this is something that is really missing in the mundane world that women are feeling stuck in. I see you, woman. You have created a life that appears to have outer success, yet feels less than rosy. You feel stuck in a dull life with chaos and drama surrounding you. You're exhausted, you're overwhelmed from putting out all the fires, and deep down, you're a sensitive soul who feels more than other people. And you just wish that you could slow down, soften, ground, and honour your needs and connect to something a bit more meaningful and soul purposeful. If that is you, I have created a 4-week journey called Rosa, which is with the archetypal rose, which is here to help you unfurl, begin to tune into some more self-compassion, self-love, and tune into a deeper place of meaning. Opening your heart, softening, relaxing into your full expression. If that sounds like you, it is starting on the 20th of July, very soon, and I invite you to check it out via the link www.nicolebarton.co.uk/Rosa. On The Secret Witch Show today, though, our guest is Claire Eccleston. Claire is a mother and grandmother, an experienced registered midwife who is passionate about the ancient and sacred arts of birthwork, bodywork, and where the two worlds meet. She has a deep reverence for our bodies, the rhythm of our physical nature, and our earthly intelligence, and she honours this womb work with deep reverence, respect and gentleness. She's also a wild dancer. In this episode, we explored the importance of connecting to our inner wild animal, aka our bodies, very much through the lens of the feminine initiation of birth and the sacred portal of sexuality, and how finding pleasure in being in our bodies is deeply healing. We dived into the shame we can hold around the body and how that can stop us being fully in our bodies, how to begin to heal trauma and the beautiful gift of our nervous system, and how we aren't broken if we're in fight, flight, freeze or fawn, but responding to the body's natural intelligence, as well as how to start to work with the body. Let's dive in. Welcome, Claire. I am so excited to welcome you and your wild expression to the show. I love your work. I know so many of my women will love your work as well, because a lot of them actually are also birth workers and things. So I feel like there's a real synergy here. And also a lot of them are mothers or have some sort of creative project that they're birthing. So it feels like this is potent on all the levels, and as I'm working archetypally, I'm really feeling the sense of like archetypal she-wolf. I was just saying to you before we began, there's like a she-wolf energy in what you're bringing today, so there's such medicine in this, and I can't wait to dive in. But welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
No, I'm so glad you are. And what I would love to start with, and I usually do start this way, is I would love to hear a little bit about your own journey into, we were talking about the inner wild animal just before we started. I'd love to hear your journey into that, if that feels a good way to you to start.
That's such a good question. I think, I hadn't thought of that, but when I think about that, I think my journey into honoring the animal of my body comes in relationship to being in connection with earth and land. And I'm from Australia, and I find the land there is very strong. And so when I think about my body as animal, my mammalian intelligence, the intelligence of being a mammal, the earthiness and the spirit in the density of my body, I think about my connection with nature and that mixture in nature of spirit and density, particularly in Australia. I don't know if any of your listeners have come to Australia, but the land can be quite harsh and wild and alive, and that sense of it's alive, it's not inanimate. The trees are alive and the rocks are alive, and the ants will bite you and the snakes will bite you. So the connection with my body starts, and I remember it as a young girl, having that connection with land.
Oh, I love what you've just shared there, because when you said that, and you said about, especially in Australia, and you kind of brought the animalistic side of nature alive with the ants and things like that. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because when I think about our land in England, it's actually like quite soft and gentle, and for me, so I love that. I guess it's not totally, but I can really feel the wildness of the Australian land that you brought alive there. Yeah, I'm wondering, because the body feels to me to be truly what we're talking about. I think Mary Oliver describes it as the soft animal of our bodies and letting that lead. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to maybe the journey that you went into your body and what kind of initiated you into the importance of that.
Yeah, I mean, I could go back so far. I could go back into, memories of being my conception or memories of my own birth. But probably the most cognitive memory I have is when I was giving birth to my first child. And I felt like that stage of when my baby is coming out of me and it's pushing, I felt like the force of a volcano was moving through my body. And it took all my will and all my might to allow that intensity, to allow that power through. So that's probably the first real cognitive memory of the power that my body could harness, and my body being powerful beyond what I had previously thought of.
Yeah, I really feel that. And it's interesting as you're saying that, I remember my own birth, and although I had been on this kind of path of spirituality for some time before I gave birth, I actually had quite a traumatic birth. So I find it really interesting when women describe how they felt this like force of nature moving through them. I love how you described that, the force of a volcano. It's so different to my own experience and the trauma that I had. And I think for me, it was very much, I was in that that kind of light side of spirituality where I was bypassing my body. And I think we talked a little bit to this just before we dived in. I'm wondering if there's anything that you can share around that and the whatever comes to mind as I've just shared that.
Well, probably the first thing that comes to mind is just, from my experience as a birth worker, just such deep compassion for everybody's birth experiences, and just from such a place of wanting to hold the deep knowing that we all do our best, babies and mums and birth givers, and that in whatever way we birth, we're all doing our best. So firstly, just acknowledge that.
Thank you.
And then I forgot Oh, but then I forgot your question.
Me too. Yeah, I was just thinking about the sense of disconnection that I had to my body because I'd been kind of traveling this spiritual ascension path.
Mm.
And since then I've been in a descent to my body. So I guess my question is, like, what is the importance of being in our bodies? Because I think we talked a little bit to that before we started recording.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a reclamation, right? Like
Mm.
so many years, like you say, ascension, which is, great too. But so I don't know, I've had so many insights where my body has felt so exquisitely powerful, particularly in pleasure. I was like, no wonder the church tried to stop this. No wonder, because imagine if women woke up to this. We'll be like half the population, like, oh, just like warriors of pleasure. So what a potent and powerful and effective mechanism it's been to keep half the population unaware of themselves and therefore not speaking up, not living, not fully harnessing their life force by shaming the female body, by shaming blood, by shaming pleasure, by shaming breast, by shaming fat, by shaming vulvas, by shaming the, what bodies do, and bodies make noises, and bodies digest, and bodies are unpredictable. So what an effective thing the church did and religion did in a way to really silence that. So I think there's a very powerful political act that can happen, and it's thousands and thousands of years of reclamation and it's easy and it's simple, and you don't need to like go in the streets with a placard like I am powerful, or women are powerful, or women are going to change the world, or if you don't identify as a woman and you have a vulva, or womb owners are going to change the world. For me, it was letting myself listen enough to what my body had to say to me, and letting myself trust enough the animal instincts of my body, and then giving myself enough compassionate care and enough tenderness that my pleasure could expand. And then I feel invincible. Like I feel in my own body such a potency, I feel like my body is such a conduit of where earth meets matter, and where my spirit meets matter. I feel my body is that lovemaking of where spirit and density come together, and that feels so potent. So, some first easy steps to that. Of course, it's can be so simple as starting with breath, because within breath, we have a little more capacity to tune into the animalness of our bodies. And the animalness of our bodies is not always pretty. Animals will protect themselves. And animals, like you said, the she-wolf, animals will protect their cubs. Like bodies will come into protection and self-protection and safety mechanisms, or, some people are probably familiar with like flight and flight, running away, or fight, or freeze, or fawn, like starting to recognize that some of the ways we function in the world are not dysfunctions. They are really intelligent safety mechanisms of our animal bodies. And when we start to give ourselves the acknowledgement that we are in fact super intelligent, not dysfunctional, we are functional animals in a dysfunctional world, then we can start to work with some of those responses of coming back into instincts.
I love what you've just shared there. Actually, it feels deeply healing for so many women who probably do shame themselves for even that kind of fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. It feels like there's a deep sense of healing in that being welcome, that being kind of like a way that our body has learned innocently to keep us safe.
Totally. And when this idea of femininity comes with being a little quiet or being super soft or being really passive. Like, I always think that's such a farce in a way. Like, it's, for me, it's not true. Like, if you look at a lot of the animal kingdom, like a lioness, she does the hunting. The lion, he sits around most of the day. Or if you look, far back, a lot of the women did quite hard labor while the men lay around, and sometimes they did hunting. I think this, when we start to separate fierceness from femininity, it's like we're cutting ourselves off at the knees. What happened there, that femininity and fierceness lost each other. Because for me to be a woman, to be in this body of a woman in my femininity, I'm fierce. And, that fight response I have keeps me safe, and it keeps my children safe. It keeps, if I'm a midwife, women who I care for safe. But if I'm under the illusion that being a good woman means being soft or kind or super patient, well, it is, it's important to be kind and patient. But when that's done at the cost of my own instinct, then I am like silencing myself.
I love that so much. Again, there's that sense of shame of our inner wildness, and really when we're talking about our inner wild animal, we're talking about the things that an animal represents, aren't we? So this piece around fierceness feels to be like a symbolic representation of the wild animal, and how she honors herself, her nose, her fierceness, her desires even. And yeah, I think there's something there to talk about. What's your sense of the piece around the shame of our wildness, and because I know a lot of women who are listening will probably feel that deep sense of like, I'm too much, my inner wild isn't welcome. What would you say to that?
Imagine we all just let it out, right? The world would be a different place. Again, I think shame is such an effective way to keep us quiet. Like, I know in my own body how effective shame has been to keep me separate from my pleasure, and separate from my power, and separate from my my wanting. And so, when I work, when shame arises, usually sometimes it's a good sign I'm on that precipice of shifting out of some constrictive patterns. And so working with shame and acknowledging that shame is usually something that's been, for many years, again, from religion and from the church, and shame is an effective way to keep women silent from their own bodies. And so when shame arises, it's often a great sign that there's something potent brewing, because maybe it's a shame around sexuality, or it's a shame around how we look in our bodies. Like, we spend so much time feeling too fat, or feeling too ugly, or feeling like our bum's too fat, or feeling like our faces are too wrinkly, that then we're not focused on having good pleasure in these bodies. Or so much time keeping our bellies in and our bums out, and then we have really tight pelvic floor and painful sex. Or so much time not letting our bodies smell the way they smell, or that shame even and around, there's a lot of shame around the sounds our bodies make. There's shame around if we like fart or poo, or this burp. And yet bodies need that. If we're holding on tight to not smell because our belly is fat, because we don't want to fart, because we don't want to say something, then the internal constriction that creates is so uncomfortable. And then when we're not comfortable, we can't speak for our needs, or eat life, or speak up for ourselves, or harness the capacity of pleasure that our bodies are capable of.
Ooh, I really feel that on many levels. I'm wondering what the costs of that are. I know you've spoken to some there, but it'd be good to just make conscious some of the ways that these kind of constrictive, like not allowing ourselves or our bodies even to just express. How is that costing women?
I think a lot. And I think, like, if you're listening to this and you notice yourself doing that, I would love to gently, invite that we all do it, and we don't do it as a fault. We do it as often conditioning. It's conditioning of external culture, of internal family culture, of a deep need to fit in and a deep need to take on what's appropriate. I think it costs us a lot. And like, if we look at sort of birth statistics, because birth is really a time where you are called into your animal body. And even sometimes you're in your animal body and you need a cesarean, right? That still happens. But if you look at birth statistics, around the world, some countries now, it's like nearly 90% cesarean rate. Even in New Zealand, where I am, some of the hospitals are 50% cesarean rate. So that's, 1 in 2 women not being supported in a way where they can claim themselves to birth instinctively. That's 1 in 2. That's a lot. Or if you look at the experiences of women in lovemaking, there's a lot of women that, or people with wombs, that aren't able to orgasm, or that aren't able to orgasm with a partner. I think it's about, I don't know, 70% or something. It's really high. And there's a lot of women that have, really painful sex, or prolapse, or incontinence, or ongoing issues with their body, like, not accepting their body, or that particularly I'm too fat, or my body's not the right shape. It costs us so much in terms of connection with ourselves, connection with our power, connection with the earth, connection with another, the way we connect with our children. It costs us a lot.
Yeah, I'm really feeling the sense of disconnection that you're just describing there. And I know that's very much true of me and my own journey. And yeah, what I'm also hearing is that sense of disconnection, but also that creation of ill health. It's like from my own journey, I know when I've been in that disconnection from the wild animal of my body, it's like this, that's where I start to feel tension, tightness. The body starts, so when you're ignoring it, the body starts to throw out these symptoms. And I think in our society, in our culture, those aren't necessarily seen as ways that the body's trying to communicate with us, communicate the wild. And we actually see it more as something to fix, something that's broken, and tend to, like, in the more mundane world or modern world, we tend to like go to outsource our power and go to maybe a doctor, and they'll give us something that will just kind of numb it more. What's your sense of that?
Sorry, help me better understand your question.
Yeah, of course. What's your sense of, what is my question? My question is, I guess, there's such, for me, that's like heartbreaking, I guess, is to see that women kind of innocently outsource their power. So I guess the question is around what your view is on that, I guess, on this piece about, reclaiming our bodies, reclaiming the wisdom that's in our bodies, and trusting that as well. I think trust was something that you mentioned earlier. I think that can be such a problem, such a challenge that women feel. Is like there's this kind of mainstream conditioning of like, this is how we create health, and we go and we get fixed and we come back. And actually there's a deep sense of like having to trust ourselves to start to listen to our body's messages. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you've got to share around that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate how terrifying it is. And I appreciate when we don't have a lot of guidance, how do you even start? Like, how do you even start? Because what our bodies will often say is that's enough. Our bodies will often say, this is what I want, or this is my limit. And when we have been living in such a way to transgress our own limits and to transgress our own needs in favor of meeting others' needs, or in favor of being agreeable, or in favor of being nice, or in favor of being fitting in, it can be terrifying to start to hear and listen. And maybe you hear and you listen to what your body's saying, but to start to respond to that, I appreciate how terrifying that is. Like, we need each other. We need, or I need, you know, you can't do this in isolation. We need other women around us, other wild women around us, other humans who are supportive of that. And if we don't have that, where do we go to seek that? Because it's a big thing, I think. You know, if you've lived 25 years or 35 years doing what you feel others expect of you, or saying yes when you want to say no, and you say yes and then your body grinds into exhaustion, or you say yes and you have deep resentment and then you get a stomach ache, or you allow lovemaking to happen before you're ready and it's painful for you. You know, there's big choices to make, to listen to our bodies. You know, if you start to say, to have the courage to say, hey, actually, I need a little bit more foreplay in lovemaking, or I need you to wait a little. I appreciate there's a risk there of upsetting the dynamics of our relationship. And yet without that, how do we get into those really deep, pleasurable, wild states if we do not start gently? So, you know, perhaps some gentle ways to start, and whether you express that or not, is to gather people around you or surround yourself with people where you feel like there's a resonance of understanding or acceptance around honesty and the earthiness of bodies, and start to recognize and hear your wants and your limits. And then the next step would be, you know, finding that support internally and externally to have the courage to express your wants and your limits.
I love that. It's almost like a sense of awareness being the first thing. And I think that's, in and of itself, takes some courage to even begin to look there, doesn't it? So, but there's such a powerful first step that so many women seem to underestimate the power of. I think when we just start to even begin to tune into our bodies with an awareness for ourselves, there's so much healing in that, because mostly we're walking around and kind of numbing them.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to numb them when we're in worlds that aren't comfortable for bodies. And I appreciate for some people, if they're feeling numb or if they're feeling disconnected, like so deeply, compassionately, how terrifying it could be to start to allow there to be awareness of a felt sense in the body. Because being numb or being in a freeze response, that's a really effective safety mechanism sometimes for some of us. So, you know, how is it, what do you wrap around you to be able to gently start to thaw those pieces? And in the science of like polyvagal theory and the science of the nervous system, often to come out of a freeze response. So freeze is like something's happened and we have turned to ice, or we go numb at an area in our bodies or all of our bodies, or emotionally. To come out of freeze back into a space of being able to feel and relate and be in relationship, usually we have to come then through fight or flight. So if we've been frozen or numb for a long time, sometimes it's the anger, the rage, and the expression of that that is the liberator back into being able to feel.
I love that. And there's so many women afraid of anger, afraid of that wild rage. So I feel like there's that's why it can often appear that this work is really scary, and I guess in many levels it does take really deep courage to be able to move through that. What would you say to women who have maybe experienced trauma of some kind and they feel the fear of going into their bodies because of that?
Yeah, then that's a lot of women, right? And I can really relate to that. And I've done a lot of work, and the work of coming into my body is ongoing.
I love that you share that.
And for me, actually, like, because I had some pretty major stuff happen to my body when I was 7, some pretty major transgressions that I'm still integrating, lovingly integrating. And, you know, like years of yelling and screaming therapy. But actually for me, what it was dance or conscious movement and having this spark of joy. And for me, the joy was the thread that became the unraveling, a softening into my body being a space that I could inhabit. It could be my habitat. So I think, yeah, breath, movement, support, a really good, skilled therapist and support person around you, and space. Yeah, it takes a lot and years. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. My experience is it doesn't happen overnight when it's been with my body or when I work with other people's bodies, because I work with trauma and birth trauma and sexual abuse trauma and rape, and I work with craniosacral therapy, and I work with the sexological bodywork with consent. Sometimes we play, you know, sometimes there's no touch. It's even just recognizing where the limits of your boundaries begin and end, and sometimes it's internal touch, and it's just it's a little bit by little bit, it's titrating it. So, you know, to expect everything to be healed in 1 year or one session, it's unrealistic. It's like taking a little piece at a time and integrating it. So be patient.
Share that. I think there's such a beauty in that that you just said there, because I think so many other healers, teachers can make it seem like this path is like, well, just come and learn Reiki and then this will be done and you'll be healed. And I think it's really important as women who are guiding other women into healing for us to share, you know, this is ongoing work. Like you said, I love that you said, you know, I'm still going into my body and unraveling things now. And it feels to me like there's such a healing truth to that. Even I know I've said to women who have been like, well, do I really need to, you know, do it for this long? And it's like, well, yeah, because it's ongoing. And I think, yeah, there's just such a beautiful, wild expression of that, first and foremost. And the other thing that I liked about what you shared there was this kind of sense of like, this deeper sense of love for the parts of ourselves that are in this fear. It feels to me that one of the most healing things for women who are just journeying into their bodies is that kind of self-compassion and self-love and being able to meet ourselves. What's your sense of that?
Yeah, thank you. And in no way to be disrespectful, but I sort of, for my own self, don't believe in healing because I don't believe I'm broken. Or I believe I'm so broken, and that's great. But it's you know, it's the sense of, if I'm broken, then I have to be fixed. And at what point will I be fixed? And what if I'm not broken in the first place? What if I've had experiences and my body did really super intelligent safety responses, and then it's just taking its time to integrate and digest the experiences I had, because the experiences I had were too big for me to digest when I was 7 or 5. And so when I develop more capacity, then it's like I'm eating a big cake, and it was too big for me when I was 7. But now I just eat a little bit at a time when my tummy is empty. So that's been really potent for me.
I love that.
Because there's this sense, if I'm healing, at what point will I be healed? And I don't know that. I feel like I'm full of trauma, and I'm so grateful that I'm full of trauma, because it informs me so beautifully in terms of my capacity for empathy, in terms of my sensitivity, in terms of what I'm able to open to in the world, and how aware I am. Like, I grew up fairly rough. I grew up in a really rough town, in a lot of alcoholic around, and a little bit rough family. And you know, my radar for safety is so fine. I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for the human experiences I've had that have informed me in the work that I do. I'm so grateful in the way that these big experiences I had opened me up to the world in a way I wouldn't have otherwise. And that's not to say I haven't grieved and raged and felt not good and had to learn a lot and had to integrate a lot, and still to the, like, even yesterday I was with my partner and something really big came up, and I'm so grateful still.
I love what you shared there, and it very much speaks to the way that I see the world as well. Although I use the word healing, for me, when I use the word healing, I'm really talking about soul healing, like a reclamation of our soul. And for me, I agree with what you said. There's like when we were born whole. And it's like over the years, there's these layers of trauma that we've lived through that actually our soul, for me, the way I view it, is our soul came here to choose into these experiences so that we could then also offer those gifts when we have healed them for ourselves, or are healing them for ourselves and have journeyed with them, that we can then also be medicine for others. So for me, I agree, there's not like this sense of like fixing. It feels like I've journeyed with that, believe me, through many different ways, but eventually I arrived at this place of like, actually, what if I didn't need fixing? What if I'm not broken? And all of this is just a call for loving myself back to wholeness.
Yeah, I think sometimes in the healing or the fixing, we can get so fixated with what's wrong with us. And that makes it hard. It makes it so hard.
It's another way of us denying our wild, actually.
Exactly. And our pleasure, and how like delicious we can be, and how capable we are.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I would love to ask you around, there's a couple of things actually. The first question is how a birth and sexuality portals for us to reclaim our wild. And then there's also a piece I wanted to talk about womb work, because I think you do womb work as well. So I was wondering if you speak to that, but maybe if we start with birth and sexuality as portals to reclaim our inner wild.
Yeah, so they're big initiations, they're big transitions. So our own birth is a really big initiation. And then, when we get our first blood, that's a big initiation. And that, sets up how we go through our puberty and how our young adulthood. And then our birth is a big initiation. There's this YouTube clip you can Google, and it's an orangutan, and the orangutan sort of stands up and she births her baby and she brings it up and sucks the goop out and gives it a little bit of resuscitation, then puts it to her breast and then shows it to the zookeeper. This is an orangutan basically like free birthing and resuscitating her baby. Like, she knows how to do it. She is just in the body is doing its intelligent thing. And yet most people with wombs, most women, have been shamed and groomed out of trusting their body. The body is not safe, blood is not safe, I'm too fat, I'm too hairy, I'm too smelly, I'm too bleedy. We draw in and we hold from 3 years old. We're shamed if we're touching ourselves, or we're shamed around our first blood, or we do not have very good experiences with lovemaking. And then the expectation is we rock into some birth room, whether that's at home or whether that's in a hospital, which probably most animals wouldn't easily give birth in a hospital. We do. And sometimes we need to, right? And there's this expectation you rock in and you're going to be like an orangutan. And there's been 20 years or 30 years or 35 years of actively dissociating from the fact that your body is animal, and that it's wild, and that it's human. So birth is a really potent portal back into that, through the invitation in pregnancy of, you can deny your body and you can ignore your body a lot if you're not sick and you're not pregnant, you're not breastfeeding. But the moment you're pregnant, your body starts to, rather than you being the master of your body starts to call itself as the master. You need to pee when you need to pee. And maybe you are morning sick for 12 weeks or however many weeks. And you start to notice your body get aches and pains, or you have a big bump, and your breasts change. And it's a prime and ripe opportunity to start to develop or redevelop the sense of, how do I trust this animal that I'm in? How do I trust this animal instinctive nature? Again, through breath, through movement, through looking at where we try to control our bodies. I think there's a lot of emphasis on controlling this body, like controlling shaving hair and Botoxing face and tight muscles, and how do we let the body start to take back some control? How do we trust it enough to give it a little leeway to show us what it's capable of? Because bodies are capable of so much, like we've evolved to this point. Sexuality the same, because in sexuality there's an opportunity, whether that's if you're self-pleasuring or pleasuring with another, it's through the body that you'll experience pleasure. Like it might be a mental turn on, but it's a pretty hard to have an orgasm without the involvement of some flesh. Without the involvement of some physicality, because it's a physical sensation. So the art of lovemaking, it's a great preparation for birth, and it's a great preparation to start to gently coax the body alive again, to gently start to wake it up through the pathway of feeling good, through the pathway of feeling pleasure, rather than through the pathway of, I'm broken, so I'm wrong, so something's wrong with me, so I have to fix myself. It's like, how do I enjoy the skin that I'm in? And even that's, how do I start to enjoy brushing my hair in the morning, or putting cream on my face? Or how do I start to enjoy the touch of the clothes on my skin? How can I use my breath to cultivate that feeling good to grow? And how do I start to feel my body as a whole? And even before you get to the genitals.
I love that so much. I'm wondering then if we can go to womb work, because I know you talked about womb work somewhere. I read you were talking about womb work and the importance of the womb in reclamation of our inner wild as well.
Would you like me to talk about how I work with women, or would you like me to talk about what I notice in terms of my relationship with my own women wild, or women's what I notice in other women when they're connecting with their womb, and how that connects them with what is wild?
Whatever feels alive for you, whatever feels most alive.
Yeah, such a big question.
I know, we could have done a whole episode on that, couldn't we?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where to start. At the moment I'm bleeding, and a lot of my awareness is right in my womb, and I'm in the euphoria of endorphins because I'm a little sleepy and I have a little cramping, so I have lots of hormones that are making me pretty dreamy and open to the other worlds. And I don't know how intimately I can talk.
Oh, very.
And my partner and I made love yesterday, and I'm bleeding, and I, I'm in this quite endorphined, hormonal, dreamy space. And he was like, afterwards, he's like, oh, I feel like really stoned, and I feel so soft, and I feel so otherworldly. So it was beautiful to share the space I was in with him through that portal of the womb. And I don't know, my sense of my own womb is of that as a portal. I feel it as in deep connection to my heart. I live in Aotearoa in New Zealand, and here we, in Te Reo Māori, the womb is called the whare tangata. Whare being house and tangata being people, the house of the people. It's a portal where souls incarnate. Like, what a precious space. This is where our bodies are made, inside the womb. It's the portal of creation. It's where you formed your eyeballs, and your fingers and your heart was inside a womb. And what I noticed through my own connection to my own womb, it's a really deep guidance for me throughout my life, throughout the world. So, like, yes, being led through the heart, but more often than not, I'm led through my womb. I notice my womb talks to others' wombs. I have some women I know, and I can stand near them and our wombs talk, and we'll say, "You're bleeding, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Oh, I can feel this going on for you." I can feel through my womb a sense of collectiveness of all wombs. Like, there's something in the knowledge of this organ and what's beyond the organ, where I get a sense of feeling the experience of all wombs, of all women, and have my own experience of what my wombs experienced. And I have also felt in my body that collective experience. And then I also feel through my own womb a deep connection into the earth, and that sort of deep, dark, fecund soil where places grow, where seeds germinate. And the wildness in that is the connection in the earth. It's the collective, probably in lovemaking, the level of orgasm and wild I feel when my womb is super activated. I feel like an animal. And it's very raw, and it's very primal, and it's very it's the place of creation. So how could it not be anything other than that, raw and primal? And I feel a lot of power from my womb, not the power that needs to go rah rah, but the power that holds me in deep, quiet, solid center.
It's so beautiful how you just described all of that. It's just so poetic, actually. So really glad that we did ask that question, even though it was a big big topic. I'm wondering if women are wanting to connect to their wombs, of course, as part of connecting to the body, like, how can they begin to open to that, even just in really small ways?
Yeah, good question. Your breath, taking your breath, and often when I've done like 20 years of birth support preparation with people, I'll talk about like a birth breath, which you can use anytime, which is like a breath in through your nose or mouth, and then the out breath goes down through your belly and down through your womb, and it's like your vulva or your vagina is breathing out. So that sense of in for energy, and then the out breath coming down and out to soften. And of course, perhaps for some people, before they even get there, it's that sense of how do they gather support around them, therapists or others, to thaw if they are numb or in freeze, because if you cannot feel your body, you cannot feel your womb. And I appreciate for many people, the womb is like a really terrifying place, or it's a place they don't want to be connected to. Breath, support, and community, and good therapists if that's what you need. Simple things like viewing your own blood. If you've always worn tampons, perhaps starting to consider, could you wear pads? Could you wear period knickers? Could you save your blood? Could you wear a moon cup? I save my blood, and I put it around the borders of my property to protect my house. And then I also put it around my car, but I ran out of blood one monthly cycle, and there was this like area of my car, maybe the size of my forearm, that didn't get the blood. And then a car banged into me right in that spot.
Oh my goodness, that is magical. Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's some story.
So connecting with your cycles, and if you're on the contraceptive pill, like I get it why people do that, but you're out of hormonal connection with your body when you're doing that. So if you have a deep desire to feel what it's like to be in your hormonal cycles, if it's appropriate for you, and it may not be, is coming off contraception, because it affects how you smell others. It affects your capacity to smell the pheromones and genetics. And
I love that.
I'm aware of time too.
Yeah, no, I love that. I was just thinking about the wild rhythms of Earth and being more when we come off the contraceptive pill. I know from my own experience when I was younger, that very much kind of was that deeper connection to the Earth as well, the Earth's rhythms, the Earth's cycles, and the cycles within my own body.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I would always bleed around when women were birthing as a midwife. And I think also having a look in the mirror, looking at our bodies naked in the mirror, which for some people like that's so far out and it's a lot. And particularly if we're looking at our vulvas in the mirror or starting to touch our vulvas and have that exploration for ourselves, because, often there's this expectation that others will stir our wildness or stir our pleasure, that a partner will be able to pleasure us. But actually that self-responsibility of what feels, taking some time to explore what feels good for you or not good for you.
Gorgeous. Yeah, I'm just wondering, before we complete, whether there are any other kind of practical ways that you can think of that you want to share, or it may not be, because you shared quite a lot already in terms of like the breathing and things like that, but if there's anything else before we complete.
Yeah, walking barefoot on earth, if you can. Swimming in the water, in the ocean. I mean, I think a huge part for me was the recognition that safety is not outside myself, it's inside myself. And with that sense of safety, then I could land a little more in my body. I could be a bit more wild, and I am pretty wild. And what helped me feel safe was recognizing what I want, recognizing my limits, saying yes and saying no. And that seems such a simple recipe, and I appreciate it's really complex. So my animalness helps me feel safe. My sense of safety is derived from letting my animalness be there. And my animalness is what do I want, and how do I say no?
That's so gorgeous. That full self-expression really is what we're talking to there, and I think that's so relevant for so many of our women. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. I would love to, as the last question, ask you to share where people can find you if they want to find out more, and anything else that feels relevant to share about what you're working on at the moment.
Thank you. So my website is www.claireecclestonmidwife.com, and I work with people on Zoom, and I'm in New Zealand, so I do bodywork sessions as well, and I teach around the world, Europe and America and here. And also I have a online school called Womb Rhythms, and I have about 9 different courses, mostly birth related, but some are somatic preparation for birth, or they're reclaiming holy ground. Harvest is reclaiming our bodies after birth, particularly our being in relationship with our vulvas. And some are around preparing for birth workers or birth givers, and some are around yoni mapping. So that's Womb Rhythms is my online school, or people can contact me on Instagram as @ClaireHomebirth. and Facebook is Claire Eccleston.
Gorgeous. That's great. We'll put all of that in the show notes as well, so that people can find that easily. Thank you so much, Claire. This has been really gorgeous. It feels very nourishing conversation, actually. So all about the body. So yeah, thank you for being here and sharing that with us.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you, love. I really enjoyed diving into the body today with Claire. Here are my takeaways. Our inner wild is our connection to our mammalian intelligence, the intelligence of being a mammal, and our body is a conduit of where spirit meets matter. Wild animals aren't always nice. Being okay with our anger, our wild no, our wild pleasure is the work of rewilding ourselves back to wholeness, and it's helpful to know that that's really what we're doing when we talk about healing. There's no fixing, but a reclamation of our wholeness. Shame can stop us being in connection to our wild pleasure and our bodies. For example, when we feel our bodies are too fat or too ugly or too wrinkly, all in inverted commas, we are not focused on having good pleasure in our bodies, and shame can suppress our connection to truth. And that can have costs of our bodies creating health challenges. It's conditioning that has us disconnect from our primal instincts and trauma, and it's easy to beat ourselves up for that, but really being numb or being in fight, flight, freeze or fawn response is a natural and healthy response that our body has to keep ourselves safe. We can start to tune back into our bodies in lots of different ways, via the breath, via dance, via self-pleasure, via connecting to our womb. And often sexuality or birth are big portals or initiations back into our bodies. To rewild is very healing, and we can do this by getting back in touch with our own natural rhythms and cycles in connection with the wild cycles of life. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.